I have a few friends that are successful touring and recording artists. And I remember when, and this is one friend in particular, she was playing in her living room, just to friends, and then went from the living room to the local cafe scene and started playing in some cafes. And maybe there was 5 people. I think one show there was like 4. And those 3 other people were my wife, her boyfriend at the time, and her brother. Fast forward to now almost 5, 6 years later, she's now performing at the biggest venues across the country, like Red Rocks and some of the biggest festivals. And she's getting paid for what she's doing. Now, this. So we are yet again this week alone, without Frank. He is sailing the Estonian waters to get his sailing license. So what I will tell you, Frank is one of the busiest people we know, and I think like he always says, oh, no vacation, it's just work all the time. But he's on like a 10-day. It's like he's like on
It's
like a
done for
10-day
days.
silent.
Yeah.
He's gone for days. This is 2 podcasts in a row. I would say everything you hear from Frank, just do the opposite. So, just kidding. I'm just kidding. What is it? Follow his actions, not his words.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
it's August 12th. It's August 13th, excuse me. August 13th. It is the dead of vacation time, I believe, for Europe, definitely for the US. I could say there's not a soul in New York who's really doing any deals at the moment. You're in Tahoe. And then in California, everybody's prepping to go away to Burning Man in like a week. Like less than 10 days, they're going to be at Burning Man. So I think this is one of those unique times where you could either get a lot of work done and be like, okay, let's push through because we're not going to get a lot of meetings, or you could take some time off and enjoy yourself. I mean, that's certainly what you're doing out there in Tahoe, Teddy. I mean, you're psycho to take this call, but it's because this podcast, but it's because for our audience, we want to show up and deliver. And I think what I want to talk about today was willpower and this idea that you need to show up even if there could only be one person in the audience listening to you. Like musicians, sometimes they'll perform and there's no one there. And the musician could put on an incredible show regardless of the size of the audience because they know that they're putting in the hard work and the willpower and pain to make it to the next step. So I don't know, maybe talk a little about willpower and sort of, you know, if anything what we're saying makes any sense. Um, and then we'll do a short show today. Even 15 minutes or 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's really important to show up. I think it's like the key to many things, many opportunities, but it's really hard to do it sometimes when it's like, there's an event and there's something, or like the worst case is when you don't know if something can happen, but if you don't show up, you'll never know. I guess that's the same thing with our podcast. I'm technically on location, but I kind of want to show up. I kind of want to see how long we can do this, and with all this like Frank not here, or I don't know, vacation time, even if it's like 1 or 2 listeners, why not? I think it's very, very important. Everyone says that. I don't
They
know.
say it's
I don't know. It's
100. It's 100 episodes or something before you get to where you feel like there's a true rhythm in the podcast. If you can last beyond 100 episodes, then you have a potential for a lot of success.
Yeah, for sure. I think we need to be able to stick around for a while, at least get to a point of either 100 episodes or a year. Uh, I think it's gonna be November, so
Yeah.
we'll be doing this till November for sure, like every week, regardless of what's going on. And that's like the first thing. The second thing would be when you don't have an audience, or you have like few people listening to your, or reading or whatever, consuming your art creation, how do you know if the structure is right? How do we know if what we're doing
You
makes
don't.
sense? Or you just do like 100 episodes and you hope that someone finds value there? How do you think about that?
I think it's a good question. I think it depends what the stakes are. I think if you've like we'll put it first in sort of this context of the podcast, and then second in the context of I would do three different contexts.
Hmm.
Podcast, startup that you're bootstrapping, and a startup that you raise money in. In a podcast setting like this, we did it because we really wanted this to be a cathartic experience for the three of us and to track our journey. I mean, it's going to be a full year in November, and we're going to say, where did we get to in this full year? And did we accomplish the things that we wanted to? And even if you're right, if we have a viewer audience of 2 or 3 views per episode or whatever, sometimes we've had 100. Some of our shorts on TikTok have had 10,000 or something. You never know which one's gonna to be the one. And I think if you really want, like, if you really wanted to make the podcast your main source of income and the way that derives maybe sales or investors or partners for your company that you're running, then it'd be a different model than what we've put together. And
Yeah.
I think we've left it open, this podcast, for that option. So if we end up deciding, whatever startup is interesting that we could work on, either individually or the continuation of what you're working on, continuation of Frank working on, then we can use this as a platform for that. But it wasn't set up like that. Um, where I think you look at a lot of the really successful podcasts, they were set up as initially a creative endeavor, but also, a business endeavor as well. So, it kind of plays nicely into that. I also think as we look at the two other options, which I said, which is a startup with bootstrapping and a startup that's raised venture. If you're bootstrapping, you've got time to figure it out. If you are, really thinking about raising capital and you end up raising venture capital, and you get a bunch of investors, then you have a tight timeline to do it. 18 months to 24 months should be your first round, and you got to get stuff done. If you've got no viewers, no listeners, which really is no customers, and your startup is based on sales and getting this product out into the market within that first 18 to 24 months, then you have a problem. But if you set up the round as, like a deep tech hardware company, in your first 18 to 24 months, maybe you get a couple of LOIs, but you're focused on building the product and getting the product out there and done. So I think, in the context again of those three areas, it's really important to understand why you're doing it, who you're doing it with, and showing up. And I want to go back to sort of the musician statement of the musician showing up regardless of how many tickets they've sold, regardless who's performing. I have a few friends that are successful touring and recording artists. And I remember when, and this is one friend in particular, she was playing in her living room, just to friends, and then went from the living room to the local cafe scene and started playing in some cafes. And maybe there was 5 people. I think one show there was like 4. And those 3 other people were my wife, her boyfriend at the time, and her brother. Fast forward to now almost 5, 6 years later, she's now performing at the biggest venues across the country, like Red Rocks and some of the biggest festivals. She's getting paid for what she's doing. Now, this doesn't mean that, she's making millions and millions of dollars a year, but she's going out and doing the things that she loves and doing it regardless if someone shows up or not. So I think that's what's key. But you also need to make sure people show up because we are in a capitalistic society, and it's important to make sure that what you're working on is not entirely a philanthropic effort. So again, this podcast is more therapeutic for us and cathartic at this point, but we could see it evolving into something even more. We don't have any sponsors yet, but uh, one of these days we will. So I think I think it's a fascinating sort of experience that we're going through right now.
Good. But I think it's really important when you start something to have the right intention, how you wanna like grow it. You mentioned initially if our podcast is something that we're doing it for as a product to be our primary source of income versus doing it the way we do, which is it's sort of like a therapy for us where we just talk about things and make sure we share our struggles and challenges through this messy middle, and hopefully that someone else is going through a similar phase will find use of our advices or things we've been through, going through some topics that we talk about, like the one with the geography or vacations, which I'm constantly thinking these days because again I'm technically on vacation, but I kind of want to work. These are like messy middle type of challenges, but it's important to set the tone initially, but equally be open for possibilities. So I don't know, say some of like the reels takes off and this becomes popular in outside of the messy middle scope. I think we should be open to embracing it and just like uh, keep doing it in that direction. We should be able to listen to our audience a little bit, although it's against what, for example, Rick Rubin says, which is do it for yourself, regardless of the audience. Forget about the audience. You should do this, whatever you create, you should create it for yourself, which I think is what we're doing right now. But I think we should be equally open for that. And what was the point about the what if the difference when you start your startup and you bootstrap versus you raise money? What was your take on that? That's where I lost you.
Internal time that you have that is the
Mm-hmm.
VC or the investor wants you to deliver something. Not saying that the bootstrapping model you also have to deliver something too, but you have plenty of time to figure it out as long as your expenses don't put you in a position where you can't afford to keep going. But I think those are two drastically different ways of funding your startup. I've never done a bootstrap. I've only done like Techtalia itself in theory is bootstrap because I didn't get any investors, but I still raised
It is.
sponsorship and everything. So yeah, in theory,
Yeah, but
but
it's not like funding, so it is bootstrap.
it
Yeah.
is. But it was also immediately profitable, right, from day one, because I figured out how to, I also feel like a lot of the bootstrap guys are like, oh yeah, I had macaroni and cheese and pizza and ramen noodles for 15 years, and then the 16th year we made $100 million. It was great. So I was just mentioning how you have different
Yeah.
external pressure. Um, and what I wanted
True.
to get out of this sort of podcast for this week for us, because again, a lot of the stuff that we're discussing, it's still vacation time. It's summer, so we haven't had a lot of excitement in our realm because we're in the States, and like I think everything will pick up in September. Uh, is I've actually been spending time and reading this book called The Tools, and it's 5 tools to help you find courage, creativity, and willpower, and inspire you to live life in forward motion. So I'm at the point where I'm getting my apartment ready to do a seasonal rental in Florida, ready to move somewhere, haven't decided where yet. And it's been extremely helpful in reading this, which is basically like I'm only on the first couple of chapters, but my favorite one is facing the pain, dealing with the pain, and realizing that the pain allows you to be free. And once you realize that, you go straight forward into the pain of dealing, and it's not the pain of like putting yourself through the most horrible situations. It's just addressing the things that you are responsible for in your life to push you forward. And if you address them head on versus kind of putting them in the back or on the back burner, it's much easier because you build up you build up this resistance to dealing with the pain. So I think that's kind of like this
When
key.
you say pain, Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, when you say about like anticipating the pain and addressing it up front, how do you know? Because when you start something, you don't really know what you're gonna be dealing with moving forward. It's just a lot of unknowns on your way. What does the book say? Or maybe that's like out of context what I'm thinking now.
No, I mean, what the book says is you won't even start if you're afraid of the pain. Like the reason why you're
Mm.
not starting something new is because you're too afraid to address the pain of maybe searching for that new idea. So you rather sit on the couch or watch TV or go on vacation than actually say, okay, let's go start something new and let's go through the pain of that process to start something new. So address the pain head on. An example that they give is there's a comedian who is a successful comedian, but is afraid to go to the next level. So he's got the intro to the manager at the club. He can do a perfect set at that club, but he's like, you know what? I don't want to sell out like everybody else. I don't want to go into the club, do the perfect set, get the Netflix special. And they're like, why not? And he's like, well, I don't want to be a sellout. That's all. And they're like, no, no, no. Let's get to the root of the problem. And they get to the root of the problem. It's that he's afraid that if he makes this phone call to the manager of the club, gets into the club, does well, goes down the route, he's afraid of the rejection that he's going to get. Um, and he's mostly afraid of changing the circumstances for the better. So, how it kind of fits in with sort of the startup angle and what we've been thinking about is we're afraid a lot of the times as messy middle founders, second time founders, of picking the idea and we're like picking the idea, picking the founders because we're not as naive as the first time around. And so this guy is a successful comedian, is again not as naive either. And it's like, you know what, it's better not to push on that. Let's just keep the status quo.
That's interesting because I'm not sure if it's pain, because in my mind, if you've been through something and you're gonna be doing it again, starting a company, just by knowing the steps that you need to get to a specific point, fundraising, talking to customers, whatever, building technical stuff, it's just the process that's so tedious, and maybe that's like putting you in this spot of I don't want to do this, I don't want to deal with this process right now, because you sort of know what's gonna happen, and it's kind of boring, trying to. Um, I think there's this analogy: you're climbing up the mountain, and then you halfway you realize that's not the right road, and then you have to have the courage to go back down, like the base camp, and start climbing again.
Yep.
I think that's. I'm not sure if it's pain, but
I mean,
if you're there for the first time, you're trying to climb the mountain and you don't know, I think it's much easier to just say, okay, maybe this is the way it works. But once you know the way and there's like a predefined set of steps you need to take, it becomes a little bit maybe painful. But I'm not sure if pain is the right word, but like it's already too predictable. So it's kind of boring in a way.
well, I mean, okay, so let's say boring is sort of the concern.
Mm.
Then you need to figure out how do you address the boredom to make it more interesting. I still think it's painful because it no matter what, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. Even if you had a success prior or even a failure prior, you don't know. And the pain that for me it stems from is the pain of that uncertainty and 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 just like dealing with a potential failure again.
Mm.
And also picking the wrong thing. Like but really, it doesn't matter if you pick the wrong thing or not. We say it does, but it really doesn't because it leads, all the roads that you take lead
Yeah.
somewhere. And the idea is that you're not supposed to just sit around and wait for it to happen. You have to make a, you have to make a, you have to make a conscious effort. So maybe from your, and I think everybody, it's different. For me, it's absolutely pain. It's absolutely pain. It's not boredom. Boredom, I mean, it's boredom if I do the exact same startup again,
Yeah.
and it's the exact same, people I'd have to work with. But it's and maybe it is a little boredom too on if it's just a regular, let's just go after it style startup. That's why I did the SPAC and everything else.
So that's why
But the
you're
pain
looking for
is mostly
something
like,
different.
fuck, I don't want to
Yeah.
spend.
Because you've been through you don't want to do another, whatever. traditional startup, you did this, you did that, you did you did the spec. You don't want to do that in the same format. You're looking for something slightly different because you also want to have this factor of unpredictability, something that will somehow surprise you in a way and make it as a challenge more rather than just like predefined set of steps. Maybe boring is not the right word, but like as long as there's predictability, I think it's as entrepreneurs, I feel it's like we're looking for this like uncertainty, exploring what's like unknown and trying to make sense of things versus having clear predefined paths. Sometimes that could be, at least in my case, that's what I'm like going through. I know certain paths will get me to a specific point, but just because I know this is what's gonna happen, I don't want to do that. So it's like, yeah, I know how it ends. Let me go this other route and explore this other thing, which may lead to whatever joyful experience. I don't know, just chasing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we beat this subject to a pulp, and you're on vacation. Give me a quote, Teddy.
Quote. There's quote again, Benjamin Franklin. They who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. That's the quote of the week.